Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. My name is Dirk-Jan Upkes, and on this podcast I give the women who work in tech the platform they need to inspire and empower each other. Join me on a journey into the world of entrepreneurship, funding, biases and role models to discover the strategies for success in the tech industry. In other words, how women can disrupt tech. Are you ready to listen? Hey, welcome back to Women Disrupting Tech, and thank you for tuning in to this special episode 125. So this episode starts about a year ago when I visited a diverse leaders in tech event at the Mews office in Amsterdam. Mews is a company that builds the future of hospitality management for hotels, and it's one of the few Dutch startups valued at more than 1 billion euros. Among the speakers were Matthijs Welle, the CEO, and Magali Elhage. After sharing her story of coming to Mews, Magali mentioned that within weeks of joining Mews, she felt safe enough to come out. And that was my prompt to start learning how Mews built a culture where people can truly be their best selves. Because make no mistake, Mews is a unicorn for a reason. And that is that everyone works extremely hard to meet customer and investor expectations. But still, the team is very diverse, and that's also for a reason. The company believes that diversity in backgrounds and experiences contributes to better results. And now you're wondering how. Well, that's what this episode is about. Magali, Matthijs, and I talk about their journeys from traditional hospitality to modern hotel tech, the power of storytelling in building an inclusive culture, and how we can deploy AI both for personal development and organizational growth. Plus, you'll discover why embracing your fears as a founder, investor, or even as an ordinary human being allows you to lead from the front line. Shout out to Meerte Bicherou for connecting me with Magali, and of course to Magali and Matthijs for their time. I'm absolutely convinced that you'll enjoy every single minute of this episode. With that, when you're ready to listen and learn how Mews builds inclusive cultures in hospitality, please welcome to Women Disrupting Tech, Magali Elhage and Matthijs Welle. Magali Elhage and Matthijs Welle from Mews. Welcome to Women Disrupting Tech. Good to have you both. Question I always ask at the start is how you got into your current position, and also Magali, I was wondering how and why you decided to join Mews.
Hello there again. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I decided to join Mews about 6 years ago. I was working in the hospitality industry in Paris, and I had reached a point in my career where I could not find myself in the industry anymore. So, a little bit of history. I come from Beirut, from Lebanon, and I had a dream to work in tourism and hospitality. So I left my country at age 20. I came to Paris and I wanted to conquer the world of hospitality. And I've had about 10 years in this career that I love doing, and I did it with passion. But very quickly, I felt that I could not be myself. I felt that I could not thrive and break my ceiling and be the leader that I wanted. So I started feeling insecure. I started feeling not well. And someone from Muse contacted me for a position. And I took a leap of faith. I went to their website. It looked very nice. It looked like people felt like me, looked like me. They were happy. And the mission resonated with what I wanted to do to change the hospitality industry. I took a leap of faith. That was 6 years ago. Um, I decided to join Muse for the mission, the vision, but also the people. And I made the right choice 6 years ago.
Yeah, can I just double click on one thing you said? You said I could not be myself. Can you elaborate a bit on that, what that means?
Yes, I worked in the hospitality industry in Paris. It's a lovely industry, but it's also a very traditional one. Traditional by nature because it is culturally embedded in the French hospitality to be traditional. but it was also an industry lacking diversity, lacking inclusivity. You have, I found a lot of aggressions, microaggressions, bullying, harassing, when you did not fit into the traditional background. I was a bit different. I was a woman in a leadership position with a strong voice, with a strong opinion that was not always welcome in a room full of men, or it was not always welcome when our investors wanted a specific picture of what their property would look like. So I struggled. I struggled to have a place where I felt respected and I felt that I could definitely be myself with my vision of hospitality, with my eccentricity. And very soon it became toxic for me to be in that environment. This is when I knew that I had to leave because I was not doing this job out of passion anymore. And it was becoming harmful for me to stay.
Yeah. So it was sort of killing you from the inside.
It was killing me from the inside. It was killing my passion for the industry. And it was also killing my performance. I was I was no longer someone that could be at top performance always. I could not be someone who came to work happy, motivated, and wanted to give out the best in me. And when you work in hospitality, it's tough because you're here to inspire people. You're here to create a magical experience for your customers. And if you don't have it, it's pointless to work in that industry.
Yeah, that energy is contaminating.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So Matthijs, you joined Mews as a CEO. You're not the founder, right?
Yeah, I joined about a year after Richard had founded the company. By the time I joined, there was two developers and a graphic designer. So it really still was like a bunch of lads in the basement underneath the old Times Square in Prague.
Oh, okay. How did you find yourself in the basement in Prague? And on the back of that, I was wondering, what were you going to build? What was the plan initially?
I always knew I was going to be a hotelier, and we have a lot of hoteliers who are disenfranchised, who are like, they thought they were going to be a great hotelier, and then you end up doing a job that you're like, this is not exciting. This is not the job that I aspired to be. And I'm
Huh?
one of those people. I worked for one of the big, large global chains, Hilton, for
Uh-huh.
about a decade, and it was fantastic. Like I learned so much. And at some point of that career, if you're very ambitious, you do get stuck. You're often the smartest person in the room. You're the hardest working person in the room. You have opinions about everything. And that is sometimes not appreciated if you have an opinion about another team in another department. And I found that I was just stuck. Like they were so good. They promoted me every single year, but I wasn't learning at the speed that I needed to learn. So I ran into Richard, said, "Why don't you just quit and just join me?" And I was like, I do everything by the book. Like I literally have a plan for my whole life planned out. But I was 30, no mortgage. I thought, well, I can take one risk in my life, like only one thing. Let me just take one risk. And I jumped and took that risk. And I joined the basement with the developers and Richard. And, the first few months, you have a lot of doubts. You're like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, this is going nowhere. But the thing is, at some point, you realize the freedom you get by being in your own business and making all the decisions. And yes, cash flow is awful, and how do we pay salaries again this month? But it's the freedom and the creativity and the learnings that I have for 12 years that I've been in this business. There hasn't been one day that I haven't learned something new. And I think that thing is the thing that drives me. I'm so ambitious as a person, and in an entrepreneur like a tech business, you can just keep thriving and keep growing, and that's the thing that just really motivates me.
Yeah. And if I hear you correctly, you define growth also as learning.
How else would I define it?
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Fair.
I think
I see growth or learning also as a way to, as the way to grow.
yeah. Like I just crave it. If so, learning how AI works, it is so exciting, and it freaked me out initially. But I'm like, well, I need to figure it out because the whole world's moving there. Let me just go and figure it out. I'll build a bot, and then I have to push everyone else in the company to do the same thing. But if I don't do that, then the fear will be crippling. The fear of I'm uncomfortable with this new change in the world. And every time I realize that something is crippling me with fear or anxiety, I jump into it to learn more about it, because that's the only way to get comfortable with something. If you learn and you embrace it, and then you get comfortable, and then you can lead from the front line again.
Yeah. Okay, so that was another way for me to define growth, is that you embrace things that are outside of your comfort zone to basically get new experiences and to find out if it's for you, yes or no.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what was the purpose of building Mews? So, building something that, because you talked about having a lot of disenfranchised hoteliers on staff, what are you going to do? Did you want to do different from, let's say, the traditional industry?
So, if you think about a traditional hotel, a lot of things are done by hand, right? You walk up, and then there's a receptionist who's typing all your personal data into a system. And in the back office, it is pieces of paper with credit card numbers on it, stapled to other things.
Hmm.
Like, it is so incredibly manual. And I ran, at some point of that career at Hilton, I ran a front desk for 800 rooms, and it was so painfully manual. And every time you want to run a report to say, what's the busiest day of the week in terms of check ins? There is no report that exists. And you just always get stuck. And this was the thing I was, envisioning with Muse we should solve. We should the core system had to be replaced. It can't just be like lipstick on a pig. We had to replace the pig to something more modern. And that's really what let's build the really, really hard thing, which is the infrastructure kind of system of a hotel. And then once you've got that, you can do really exciting things like build an online check-in so guests can check themselves in. No one enjoys queuing at a reception desk, giving their passport, giving their credit cards, filling in registration cards. Nobody in the world wants to do that. So, like, let's just build that. And that vision that from 12 years ago has actually not changed that much. The ambition has just got bigger over time.
Yeah. So, how did you get your first customer?
Yeah, that's really like it's really hard because
Was
you
that Hilton? That you
no,
just went straight back like, hey guys, I've got something to solve all your problems
no,
or
you
all
have
the
to go the
problems
hard
I
way.
ran into?
There you go from the bottom up. So initially, we had built it for the hotel that Richard's family runs in Prague, but that's your own hotel, so that's easy. Then finding your first customer, and we just walked into hotel lobbies with our laptop and said, "Hey, can we show you our new system?" And everyone's like, "No, scram, get out! Like we've got a great system. It's the industry leading solution." And it really was very painful. Like you get a lot of rejections in the beginning. Luckily, we found some hotelier friends of mine that were willing to take a risk on us at some point. And the first 10 were connections or friends from the industry that were taking a risk. And then it starts to move, but it's very, very difficult.
And just to make sure it's clear what Muse does, you make software to help hotels basically run a lot smoother.
We basically take over the entire tech stack for a hotel. From the most visible is the reception desk, but it's all the restaurants, the way that orders are taken in the restaurant. Housekeepers are on smartphones inspecting rooms. It's literally every person in the hotel that works with our system.
So I want to move to the main part of the conversation because the reason I invited you on, I've also hinted on that in the intro, is that you're an incredibly fast growing. Well, I don't even call it a startup. It's a scale up. It's a unicorn, I think, even. And what really struck me when I first ran into Muse was that it's so incredibly inclusive, but it's inclusive by design almost. Because what I see is that inclusion and belonging is mostly as a sort of add-on. How did you build inclusion into your way of doing business, into your way of running the company from the start, Matthijs?
So it wasn't intentional, right? You're just fighting for survival. But a gay man, naturally you're hyper aware of things around you because you've always had to think, right, am I going to be my true self or am I going to be the straight version of me just because that's what's expected? So that hyper awareness of your own minority status, even as a white man, right? So like I have an easier life because I'm a white male, but I am gay at the same time. And sometimes you have to hide that depending on what the situation is, especially if you're living in Eastern Europe. It is quite a different place. So that hyper awareness naturally builds in a safety, because people know if I'm struggling with something, I can turn to Matt because he understands what I stand for. I often recognize minorities and I will randomly call them, like reach out to them saying, hey, how can I help you? How can I support you in your journey? And I try and push people a little bit out of their comfort zone. And I remember a conversation that Magali and I had a couple of years ago where I said, I think you should lean into it rather than step away from not talking about it. You should talk about it because you have a triple kind of minority status. And I'm like, that's a really powerful thing for others to hear because you are thriving in your environment. So for me, it's just naturally baked in. But also because we were in Czech Republic, a country where everyone speaks Czech at the workplace,
Mhm.
I didn't speak it. So it was almost my laziness to not learn the language that forced us. I had the conversations like, I'm really sorry, but all written conversations have to be in English. So naturally, the culture starts to build from the first four in English. And then as you start hiring people, you bring a much more international crowd in, and then that builds and that builds over time. So it was some unintentional, like it wasn't a strategy once we started because we were just fighting for survival. But there was a few seeds that we planted very early on.
Okay. Magali, I think Matthijs just said something really powerful. He told you to lean into your identity. How did that make you feel?
I remember that conversation with Matt. We were having lunch, and I always speak very transparently to Matt, and I told him, like, I need a role model. I need a coach, a mentor that looks like me, that is also from a diverse background. And then Matt looked at me and said, "You're it. You're that person. You are that inspiration for your other colleagues. You are a woman in a leadership position. You're a member of the LGBTQ plus community. You're also a mom. Share your experience. Share your struggles. Be vulnerable. Open up with people." And I did. At first, I did not feel comfortable. I called a friend. I was like, "This is what my CEO recommends. What do you think I should do?" I had a lot of thought about it, and then I spoke at a company all hands in front of more than 400 people. I shared my experience, I shared my thoughts, and so many people reached out to me that day by saying, like, your testimony is having an impact on me. It's helping me be better at what I do. It's helping me come out. Um, and it was so powerful to hear all those messages that I'm happy that I did. I'm happy that Matt pushed me. I'm happy to speak also sometimes on behalf of my community, because we are in a situation where every voice counts, and we need to unite and we need to ally so we can definitely convey those messages. No matter how early your startup age is, or your scale up, or you are a unicorn, or even a big tech, those voices matter, and it's important that someone represents them and not just the CEO.
Yeah, so is that also, Matthijs, a culture you want to build so that it sort of trickles down, so that all the people inside the company have a role model like Magali or like yourself?
Like I think so, because like I only represent the white male gay community in some sense, right? So, and people don't want me to mansplain how it works for women. They want to see someone just like them that says the right things. And so I always look for examples. When I hear someone who is very open, I will reach out to them one on one and say, "Hey, how comfortable are you to speak about that publicly?" And I find always the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion is really hard because, probably the listeners to this, they are the converted. They do not need to be convinced that this is the right way to go. But how do we reach the ones that actually need to hear this? They're not going to tune into this podcast. But I can reach them through, for example, an all hands. If I, just have a 5-minute segment in an all hands once every so often, they don't know it's coming, but it's a really personal story of someone who's experienced something and they just talk about it very humanly. This is a person that they deal with all day, every day, that they now learn something new about. Like neurodiversity was one of those topics that, it's invisible. And when you suddenly give it a face, then they start to talk about that. And that really excites me. But I couldn't have done that. Like I couldn't have talked about my neurodiversity status because I don't have it. I don't understand it. So I have to find a role model for it.
Is it about giving it a face? Is it?
I think the storytelling is really critical. Often, it doesn't land because the moment you say diversity, equity, and inclusion, you've just tuned out an entire audience. Like they're like, right, I don't, that's from the left wing. I don't want to hear about it. That is not for me. But if I talk about Magali and her specific situation, and I tell the story of Magali and the hardship that she's gone through in her life to get to where she is, people don't think that that's DEI because they don't know what DEI is. It's just a swear word from the left. Um, but if you tell the story of a person and you don't say the word DEI, suddenly they'll listen.
Okay, so if I want to broaden the scope of my audience, you recommend that I don't talk about DEI, but just talk about people, which is actually what I'm trying to do because
I
it's
think
about.
so. I think it's
I
a
agree that
branding
it's
issue.
yeah, that I fully agree with.
And it doesn't, the thing is, it wasn't like this a year ago or longer, but it still had some impact. But it's just become so toxic now that the people, like, you've got the people that are converted, you've got the people who are like, don't want to hear a thing about it, but you've got the middle, the group of people that are just like,
Yeah,
I'm open to it. I'm not probably going to sit it through an entire podcast, but I'm open to hearing an example once every so often so that it opens my mind. And it's those people that we want to reach. But because of the extremity of what the media is portraying now, they've moved away. They're like, oh, okay, it's clearly toxic. I just don't want to be associated with it. But they're still the most important people that we have to convince.
yeah. How do you do that in the inside a company and also towards investors? How do you persuade them that the way you're running the company, not necessarily as a diverse or as an inclusive company, but more your way of doing things? How do you persuade them, hey, this is the right thing? Is that then still about telling, hey, I'm just earning you boatloads of money? Have you ever had any
Yeah,
criticism on this?
it's really hard because I lead with my mouth and like I don't really have a filter. So I do sometimes get in trouble because I say things in the wrong form or something. But generally, I lead with ask for what you can say, like you don't ask for permission, but you apologize
Ask for
afterwards, and
Yeah,
forgiveness.
that's
Yes.
yeah,
the strategy that I follow. I just say the thing that's on my mind, and most of the time, it leads to the right outcome. And then whenever I get wrong, I just apologize really nicely, and you get away with that. And I think it's important. Um, like it's the right thing to do, and most people recognize it when you explain it in the right words. And somehow I've been able to get away with most of it, but I've also always been this person. It's not a person I've become because we got a chief people officer who tells me to be that person. I've always been this person. So if you're doing business with us, like, and you see me on LinkedIn, this is what you get. This is who I am.
yeah, and that sort of also filters away the wrong crowd in terms of investors, I would think.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, how does it help? Hey, you have a mission to simplify hospitality. How does that help to get the right people on board and also to get a bit of an international crowd on?
Like, if you think about hospitality, everyone in the world stays in hotels. So you have to figure out a way to connect with everyone, and solve everyone's needs. And I think that's why we lean into diversity so much, because I'm like, how do you build a product with just a group of white men that serves everyone, that understands everyone? And it's the simple things like neurodiversity or color blindness or female travelers. And if you bring those people inside our company, then we build products that are more inclusive, that people love, because the buyers of the products are much more diverse, the stakeholders that are evaluating us, and if they recognize that they're being recognized, they will be more likely to buy a product like Mews. And that's some of the success we're seeing, because we really do look at all aspects of the diversity spectrum, and we try and figure out how do we support those parts of it. It does require you to then bring in that diversity, and very early on, we up until the 15th employee, I think we were all men, because you start with lots of developers, and
Yeah,
in the Western world they're mostly men. And when the first women came in, and I remember the first two women that we hired, I was concerned, because I was like, God, these women are going to come into this male culture, and I really had to ask them, saying, are you comfortable with it? How can I support you in this? Because I realized you're about to walk into this male man cave, and it isn't. We're not used to having women around. But I just asked them, And I started that conversation. It's like, I want you to be comfortable. Like, how can I support you in this environment? I'm just very directly asking people, and I recognize that diversity, and I'll just lean into it. If I'm uncomfortable, I'll be the first saying, I'm really sorry. I'm going to ask you a really stupid question. But can I just, what do you think about this topic? And if you start like that versus, directly just ignoring their diversity status, it's very, very different. And I get away because I smile nicely and I'll ask a dumb question. They forgive me for saying stupid things out loud. And I think that is the best way to sometimes lead.
Yeah. How did you prep the men? Because you were in a man cave. How did you prepare the men to be welcoming to those women? Did you?
I didn't actually. Um, No, I didn't really, and I probably should have in hindsight. Like right now, I would, but at that time, I was so junior still. I was just 30. Sure, I'd done some management jobs, but I hadn't purposely thought about it. In hindsight, I possibly should have said, hey, we're starting to diversify this group of people. Would you feel comfortable if you're a woman walking into this office? And I think in hindsight, I probably should have done that. Yeah.
No. Did you make any small changes, like to the toilets or to cleaning up the sink?
Yes, Yes, I'd like to say yes, but like honestly, we had no money for cleaners and things, so it was always a mess until we started to professionalize the business. Um, I think the men in the office naturally started doing that because there was women around. So previously, we were living off Uber Eats. So some desks were stacked with old food cartons and stuff. But suddenly, when there's women in the room or a diversity, like people feel a little bit uncomfortable, and they then become aware of some of these behaviors that they have, and they naturally started cleaning up after themselves.
Oh, that's it. I do recognize it, but it's interesting that once a woman enters the room, the whole uh,
The dynamic
uh
shifts.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, Magali, I was wondering, from what I hear, Mews is a really safe place to work. What does a safe place look like to you?
At Muse, what I like is a bit what Matt mentioned about the open communication and the vulnerability. Feeling safe means that I can discuss any topic with the leadership, with our people team, or with almost everyone at Muse. If I have struggles, if I have challenges, I feel comfortable and I feel safe bringing them up. Because if I'm feeling something, probably other people in the company are feeling the same. But I'm not scared of speaking up. And as Matt mentioned, he's also very direct. When he has a
Mm,
question, when he has an opinion, he
mm,
voices it. And
yeah.
it's not just because he is the CEO of the company, he encourages this type of behavior in everyone else in the company. And that's been since day one, since I joined Muse. And now, 6 years later, it is the same culture that is allowing us to speak up, to disagree, sometimes to move on and commit to something, even if you disagree. But this open communication and this forum of transparency is what helps me feel safe. But it's also in creating environments where we are intentionally talking about those topics like diversity, like neurodiversity, like being queer at work, like being a parent at work. And it is building the intention into turning our company into a space environment. And even if Matt said, like, probably in the beginning it was not intentional, it was just a wish or a desire from his side and from the founder's side, and that wish became something that was built into Muse DNA. And today I feel that we're in a situation that if Matt were to leave Muse, or if our chief people officer were to leave Muse, we're in a very good place because the foundations of this safety is built and it's very strong. And this is what is allowing us to scale, is that because we were able to create a safe space for everyone to thrive in
Uh-huh.
and to be able to share their experience, their expertise, their concerns, that we are in a better place now to build something even stronger on those foundations. And it's a translation of what Matt's been trying to build, but also what everyone in the company are building as well. It's not just a one person job. It is everyone that is part of building that culture. Today we have ERG groups. Every ERG group has a different topic, but we have the women at Mews that are building a strong future for women in tech, but also for women at Mews. And those are very strong programs where we ask ourselves the question, what would make it a better place for us at Mews or in the world of tech? So those programs are sponsored by our leadership. They're sponsored by the company, and they're allowing us to be creative, to be innovative, and to think about what the future would look like for us. And I feel that this is incredible, and this is how safety at work translates today.
Yeah. So also that you can speak your mind, you can be yourself, which i- going back all the way to the beginning was what you were looking for in
Exactly,
a
yes.
job. So then and what struck me in your answer is that it's a sort of, um, it's not just at the top, someone shouting from the top, hey, thou shall all uh, uh, be yourself, but it's also facilitated through ERGs, and also through the people inside the company.
Yes, exactly. It is becoming part of our DNA. And it's everyone's responsibility, but it's also evolving because you cannot build everything from the start. You
Uh-huh.
build, you iterate, you build, you grow, you make it better. And I remember when I became a mom at Muse, I I came back from my 6 month maternity leave and I was completely lost. And I did not know if I was going to have the same job. I did not know. It was the first time for me being a mom. And during my maternity leave, people reached out to me. My former manager reached out to me and he's like, we're waiting for you. You're gonna be a mom, you're gonna be a mom leader. You're always gonna have a job at Muse. Um, even if you're on a 6 month maternity break. And only those words felt reassuring. But it also meant that we did not have a program around it because I was not the only parent, right? We had a lot of parents coming back to work. And that sparked like a light bulb in our people team and in the leadership team saying, okay, like this is the time where we have to start building for the future because more and more of our team members will go on parental leave and come back. How do we build a program where they feel safe coming back to work, where they feel that they have the support of our company when they come back to work after such a long break? And this is what I mean by building as you grow is that you cannot build everything from scratch. When you're a startup, you have a million other priorities,
Yeah.
but it's adding small pieces to the puzzle every time you're faced with a new situation that
Yeah.
is allowing us to grow.
And also taking things as they just come naturally. So over time, you will run into people becoming a parent, and then, oh, now we have to do something. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, like and like that's where as we started growing and our entire population of users got older. So once they start hitting their 30s and mid 30s, suddenly children started appearing.
Yeah.
But like we've got to be deliberate about it because we're operating in 20 more countries where we have employees, and not everyone is getting equal parental cover. And we said we have to have a policy that is inclusive because in some US you get what 3 days or something. I don't even know what
Yeah.
it is. It's so ridiculously bad. And then you get some countries where it's incredibly long. And we said we have to have a minimum baseline because we think it's important that women should, or sorry, the primary caregiver. It's
Yeah.
important that we call it the correct wording. The primary caregiver gets 6 months, and the secondary caregiver gets 2 months. And that's much more inclusive in language toward moving on from women to just any gender because God knows what a couple looks like. And that also is saying to the people like, we value you. We value that you need to spend time with your family, but hopefully you will come back because we make an investment in you. And then when you come back, hopefully you will have several years that you're going to stick with us and return on that investment. But young parents should spend time with their families because if you take that away from them, that is not going to help their workplace happiness. And it's hard because yes, a person will leave for 6 months and there's work that needs to be done that somehow sits in that void, but that we figure out. And I think it's more important ethically to make sure that people get to spend time at home with their families, because then they'll come back more loyal afterwards. And hopefully, it deals with some of the gender pay gap that we see. We definitely have a gender pay gap at Mews that I am very unhappy about, but it is a long term commitment to solve for that. And this is one of those things that we've done to help fix that.
What is out of curiosity, on the pay gap? What makes it difficult to solve that sort of in one go?
Because it's not equal pay for equal jobs, right? So if you are a director of deployment and you're a woman, you'll get the same salary than if you were a man. It is about their progression inside the company. Women just don't progress as fast across the company. So if you take all the salaries and you divide it into quartiles, in terms of pay equity, women just don't progress in their careers as fast as men do.
Hmm.
And that's creating the gender pay gap. We publicly talk about this. Once a year, we publish our results, which we don't yet legally have to, but I can't wait for that moment that all companies have to do this. And it creates this responsibility to management to lean into it, saying, well, why do we have a pay gap and where is it coming from? And what can we do better to make women thrive in the workplace? Or we look at the hiring, and like for some roles, you just are given male candidates. And we just have to ask, sorry, at the top of the funnel, I want a more diverse top of funnel. And yes, the best person for the job might be a male candidate, but I still want to see women that are qualified for it to make sure that we've gone through that process.
Yeah, that we actually did select the best person for the job,
Exactly.
and that we can prove that it's the best
Exactly.
person for that
Yeah.
job.
And then looking at how do you interview? Because people with biases will lean into certain types of questions to, I will identify much more easily with a white homosexual than I do with a white male, just naturally, because that's where my inclination is. But I need to remove those biases in the interview process. So we're trying to really work with scorecards and standardized questions that we're asking. We use MetaView to record all of our interviews, and it gives us suggestions on coaching and your talk to listen ratio. And it's really helpful because AI is really good at filtering out whether you have unconscious biases that you need to address through training in some way.
Hmm. Is that something that you've built yourself, this software?
No, we buy it, and we've changed many times because AI is moving at such a speed. But we always want to be at the forefront of buying the best innovative technology. So your standard scorecards you have to develop, but you need a software that supports it. And there's some really good solutions out there now.
Okay. Oh, that's cool to hear that at least at the entry side of things, it's taken care of. Um, so I want to circle back a bit to the gender pay gap in terms of career progression. How do you solve for that within Muse, and how does it influence culture?
So we always we look at the gender pay gap we have, and then we break it down by department, by region, to understand where it comes from. And we have like management development tracks. So we have an internal learning and development team that has manager tracks. We've got an employee resource group that focuses on women and other diversities. So you really start to just lean into saying, okay, if women need a role model, where would they turn to? They turn to the employee resource group to find people like them that are open in this group, this really safe environment. They're not going to naturally find, I don't know, a person that it has a neurodiversity difficulty, but they might find them in the ERG for neurodiversity. And it's really finding role models that then become a mentor that can say, why are you stuck in your career? What can I do to help you progress in your career? So we really think about the entire employee life cycle. So we mapped out, and we're in this process of remapping it now, of when an employee enters to when they leave, and what are all the moments of contact and career progression moments and performance reviews. And then we look at it, well, how do we go about performance reviews and salary reviews and high performers versus low performers, and how do we deal with that? And every touch point is one of those points where we should have someone ask the question, saying, is there any bias in this process? How are we addressing that in the right way? And it isn't clear cut.
But also, what I'm hearing you say that when it comes to the ERGs, it actually, in a positive way, uses those biases to help people thrive.
I honestly never thought. So with the first time I heard about ERGs, I was like, oh, that's just some corporate mumbo jumbo. I was like, this is just a thing we have to do because that's what the corporates expect. And now we're a big old grown up company. But actually, we did one thing differently because often ERGs are like a passion project and you do it on the side besides your very, very busy job and you don't get paid for it. And I was like, that's just wrong because these people are doing something really important. They're building culture and they're diversifying our employee base. So we started paying them in equity. So you get equity shares, long-term output from building culture. So that was one of the things we dramatically shifted. But also once I started seeing the output of the ERGs, it's really powerful when, we had the Pride all hands 2 weeks ago. There's so many stories that you just don't know about that they're doing in the background. And yes, it is still very corporate mumbo jumbo, but it actually works. And that's why it's worth investing into it because it is a place of safety that people with a diversity background can turn to find role models, to learn how to deal with specific situations. And it genuinely works.
Yeah. So Magali, the safe space that Mews is, how can you share a bit of how it has helped you performance-wise and career-wise?
Definitely, because I've, as I mentioned before, I came from environments where I did not feel safe. And what does that look like? First of all, you see the impact on your mental health. Your anxiety kicks in. You come into work every day with a will to escape the fastest possible way. You're scared of making a move. You've put your energy and you focus on the things that don't really matter, on how you look, on how you speak, on how you act, on how you interact. That means that you don't have energy left to actually perform and to produce anything. And I felt this when I was in unsafe environments. I felt that I was blocked and I was just not delivering the quality and the the work that looks like me. And when
How did you feel that?
you don't have energy left. You don't have energy left. I was working in a hotel. I did not have energy left to go meet my customers. I did not want to because I had spent an hour and a half of my morning making sure that I looked like something appropriate for my peers, that I could hide myself, and that I needed to remember everything that I had said during our last interactions because it was probably something that was going to come up in the Monday morning discussion. So, for example, I would get a question like, "What did you do this weekend?" And I wanted to hide that I was back then dating a woman. So I would just come up with different things to divert the attention. But then on Monday morning, I put all my energy into this interaction with my colleagues and with my peers. What am I going to tell them? What did I actually do this weekend? How did I feel? So it was just creating something fake at the end of the day instead of focusing on who were my customers, what kind of service was I going to give them. And it was probably me that needed to do this work on myself, but it was all that I could think about. And at the end, it just diverted the attention from what I was supposed to deliver to something else. And at first, I was not very conscious about it. But at some points, I would go into meetings and get out of meetings by saying, I did not contribute once. I did not say one thing. I was member of the executive committee of this hotel or of this group, and I did not want to share my opinions anymore because most of the time I was interrupted. I was dismissed. My opinion was like, okay, thank you very much. You said something in a 2-hour meeting, and I was shut down. I was not listened to, and at the end, it meant that I no longer wanted to share anything. I was just demotivated. I was scared. And I felt that it was just a vicious circle of me not contributing, them having a bad impression of me, and then it was just a toxic circle. I had to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I saw the difference when I joined Mews. And from the first 2 weeks at Mews, I felt that it was okay, that they couldn't care less who I was dating, who I was, what kind of
How did you
background
sense
I came
that?
from. To be fair, we had the new hire orientation, and Matt specifically meets everyone in the new hire orientation. And he always starts with an intro of this is me, this is the picture of back then his boyfriend, this is a picture of my dog Beyonce. And I was sitting in that room, I was like, okay, I'm here. They have rainbow flags on their website, but it's not marketing. It's not fake. You have your CEO standing up in front of a room of 25 people and saying, hi, this is Matt and this is my boyfriend. And the fact that his opening sentence is this, it sets the tone, right? And then we jump into business. But I learned that, okay, I was in a safe environment. If my CEO is okay, then I'm okay. If you can make it to C-level being who you are, it means that my career is not stuck because of who I am. And it was not just Matt, it was everyone. It was the first interaction where everyone feels okay to share in 2 words who they are. I'm a family person. I have 2 kids. I have a dog. I like hiking. And it's that introduction around who you are, then what you do, that is creating the foundation of a safe space. And I felt it immediately because it took me 2 weeks to come out at Mews. And then this opened the door for me to other things, to my family, to some member of my extended circle that had no idea. Um, and this is what it meant for me, that one, from a career point of view, I was safe. It meant that I had no limits, I had no boundaries anymore, and that I could come out. And you have this feeling of safety 6 years later when the company is bigger, when new hire orientation is something more structured than before. But everyone that joins Mews today has the same feeling, is that start with who you are if you want to. This is a safe space. And then let's dive into business once we have removed all those invisible blockers that are not allowing you to perform. And this has helped me immensely because my first 2 weeks when I started working, I felt something different in me, in how I was attending meetings, how I was talking, how I was speaking. And I found my old self by knowing I am a competent person. I
Yeah.
know what I do. I am an expert in my field, but I was no longer in a position where I had to hide it, where I had to shush it. On the contrary, it's like you just turn on the engine and then I was flying. And that helped me, and it continuously helps me every time I pause and I assess the situation. Because sometimes, let's face it, not everything is great, even at Mews. And sometimes I am in situations where, like, okay, I get out of this meeting, I don't feel it. What what went wrong? Why did I not voice my opinion? Why didn't I raise my hand and say I disagree? And it's allowing me just to take a step back and reflect. Who was in the room with me? Why did I felt intimidated? What could I have done better? And I know that I have the ability now to talk about it. I can just pick up the phone and call that person and say, hey, listen, during the meeting, the first 10 minutes, you kept interrupting me. I don't really perform well in this type of situation. Can we please be cautious of next times? And I learned this. Now I stand in front of my mirror and I question it. What happens if I get interrupted in a meeting? I'm usually frustrated and I get annoyed and I can be I can show that I'm frustrated. But I learn also to take a step back and say, okay, let's just talk to that person. Maybe it was not intentional. Maybe that person was not aware that they were interrupting me. And it's the ability of just opening up the conversation and just talking that is allowing us to improve, not just myself, but all the stakeholders as well. So
And
it's
there's two sides to the diversity thing that you talked about. There's the you're not comfortable to share personal parts of your life, so you hide them, and then you have to remember what you said, and then all you do is think about how am I dealing with that situation, and you're not focused on the work. But then there's the people that are there to judge you and to promote you, who are like, she's hiding something. Like there's something wrong with this person. I don't want to hang out with them. They're hiding something. And when a promotion comes up, they will go with the person that's most natural, that they trust. And there's two sides to that, and that's part of the reason why it's so hard to solve this. Because unless you create an environment where people can speak up and open up, you will never get to know all of the people, and the other sex will thrive in that environment. So there's so many layers to this challenge. But I recognize what Magali is saying. I recognize that in some situations, like I'll get into an Uber here in Amsterdam sometimes, and I'm like, right, he was like, oh, your wife, this and that. And do I correct him, or do I just go with it? Because it's the safest thing. I'm in a car with a stranger in the middle of nowhere. I'm probably just going to go with it because I don't know what he thinks. And you're always making these decisions. But every time you do it, you're unnatural in your communication. And that somehow it is seen by people.
Yeah, people sense that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually, that's powerful that you shared this last bit, Matthijs, that actually, because people share it, it also, again, if you can't be yourself, if you can't be your true self, if you have to hide things and have to make sure, to your point, Magali, that you have to remember, oh, I said this and this there and there, so I have to keep things straight, and then I can't go off the line. It sort of becomes a sort of rehearsed pitch rather than a true story.
Exactly. And you cannot perform. You cannot perform well. Your energy is focused on something else. I'd rather focus my energy on my performance, on doing my job correctly. And you see, when that weight is off your shoulders, that you can focus on the things that matter. My productivity, my efficiency, my job as a leader. This is what's important. And at the end, I'm here to build a high performing team. And Mews is also building a high performing team. I just want to make sure that I am comfortable and then my team is comfortable at work, so they can perform, so they can outperform themselves and continue breaking their ceiling and pushing for more innovation, more creativity. And you can only do this when you're in a good place, when you're in a safe place.
I want to double click on something you said about rehearsing in front of the mirror,
Yes.
Magali. Because you're asking yourself these questions. So what happened? What can I do better? Or maybe what should I tell the other person how it made me feel? Um, when we spoke before, you told me that you had built some sort of coach for people inside Mews, that they can actually see how they performed in meetings and where they sort of can do the same. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Because it got my mind racing, I can tell you.
Yes, it's been racing my mind for almost 2 weeks, even 3. But a while ago, Matt was sharing his story of how he was able to build a bot in less than 3 hours. It was a very inspiring talk on LinkedIn, but also within the company, where he's like, "Listen, I've built this. It took me half a day, but I'm happy that I built a coach, and I encourage you all, a bot, and I encourage you all to look into AI, because this is what's going on in the industry." And I was staring at a blank page. I did not know what I wanted to build. So I stared at a blank page for about a week, and I had a reflection. What would help me? What would help me get better at my job? And I love receiving feedback, because I feel that this is the only way that I can grow. So I built an AI coach that reads my meeting transcripts and that gives me recommendation. Um, and first of all, yeah, the first recommendation were very tough to read, but then I made it around my interaction specifically as a woman when I was either leading a meeting or attending a meeting. And that coach today analyzes what I say, how I say it, how I handle objections, how I handle microaggressions, how I handle interruptions. Am I conveying the right opinion? Am I making a point? And it analyzes based on the seniority levels of attendees in my meetings. So if I am facing a VP position or a C level, or if I am leading my team, how are my interactions changing? And it's also giving me recommendation on what are the things that I should avoid doing and the things that I could start practicing. And the first transcripts were not easy,
Uh-huh.
but I had noticed a lot of things that I'm very apologetic in meetings. And I knew that I was doing this, but once I took every transcript of a meeting and I saw that every single meeting I was apologizing about something, either my bad internet or the fact that I could not see the screen or the fact that I did not have an answer to a question. And that came out several times. Or the fact that I had a strong opinion, but whenever someone had an objection, I tended to dismiss my opinion and to let other participants argument their own opinion. And at the end, you're like, okay, whatever, you do whatever you want. And those things, I knew about them. But when I read about them, and when you have a coach that says, you had a strong opinion in the beginning of the meeting, what happened to it? Why didn't you stick to it? It was eye opening. And it was great for me, but I also wanted to share it with peers. So I gave it to a few members of the Women at Mews ERG. So we tested it. We were about 40 women to test it. And everyone had the same feedback by saying, okay, it's incredible that it's pinpointing exactly what in my communication I could enhance. It's making me better, but it's also giving me recommendation of sentences that I could use. Instead of saying, sorry, I can't see the screen, um, I suggest that you rephrase by saying, can you make the screen a bit bigger? It is very slight recommendation, but so far the tool is working. A lot of women are using it, and I've made it public to everyone at Mews a few days ago. So I'm really hoping that we'll start using it in our meetings, and that it will also help coach other women in the company,
Yeah.
because I really found it very beneficial.
Yeah. Do you think it also would benefit men to get a reflection on how they are uh, interacting in meetings and how they can perform, maybe not perform better in terms of the meeting structure, but more in terms of how they can make meetings more um, inclusive?
I definitely think it could benefit men. Um, we have a Mews constitution, the constitution of Mews, that is made of several articles and what Mews expects of you in terms of performance, innovation, etc. But there's a whole piece about interactions, respect, human interactions, being aware of other people's diversity, being inclusive in your meetings. And I think I could definitely incorporate that element of this constitution and give recommendation on how to become a great ally to your team and how to become a more inclusive manager, if you're a male at Muse. And I think it would definitely be a good tool for everyone, not just for women. Yes.
Okay, I see Matt nod.
I hate it. It's terrible. Awful
It's,
idea. White men, we don't need it.
yeah. Okay. I was wondering, Matthijs, bit going back to a question I asked earlier. Now let me precede this question because you tasked everyone to play around with AI. At the beginning, you said something that struck me in the sense that you were a bit scared of AI. What was that and what changed it?
Yeah, when AI came out in, what is it, November 2022, I think the first time you saw it, you're like, wow, this could destroy our business. Like the first thought as a tech entrepreneur is like, this could destroy everything that we've built overnight if I don't figure this out. Because you didn't know how fast it was going to develop and how good it was going to be. And luckily it's not as extreme in that sense. But in the moment you don't know. So there's just this fear of, I don't understand it. I don't know how fast it can go. and what it can do to our business. And in that fear, you can either say, well, let's just see what happens, or you can figure out what happens yourself. And you want to be at the forefront of the innovative side of it and just figure it out. And that's really what, like, initially I asked the marketing team to put me on a stage, get me a keynote to talk about AI in hospitality. I said, just find me a stage, because that's the forcing function for me to actually have a story. And it led to us really talking about, well, what are we going to actually do with AI inside our product? So the forcing function is the fear, then put me on a stage, I'll learn it, and then it becomes part of the strategy. Um, and earlier this year, I felt
Did you think it through like that?
no, but it's a behavior that I've taught myself. Generally, like every time I feel nervous about something, I need to lean into it. Like, because I just don't want to ever feel nervous, because I will ask the dumb questions out loud, but only if I recognize that I'm actually interested in learning a new skill. It's just recognize fear. That's the most powerful thing that I can tell anyone to do, and then just lean into it. Just go and figure it out. And most things you can solve, I find. So, there's some projects at Mews that are not particularly going well. And like, okay, how do I deal with that? Like, I don't have time for it. But I realize that these are massive cross-functional projects that are failing, and I should be there. I need to figure out what's going wrong. And it's this ability to be like a T-shaped engineer. You've got that notion of, being a specialist, but also having enough information about the rest of the organization
Mhm.
to kind of contextualize
Yeah.
everything. And I want to be this T-shape. I can dive into a very specific topic, get to the detail, make a decision, pull back out, and get back up to the surface level. And I think that's one of those really important skills that I've just learned through the years to hone. And initially, in the old times, we would call that micromanagement. Today, I think it's a really important leadership skill.
This is brilliant. We used to call it micromanagement.
Yeah, we rebranded it.
Yeah. This I gotta keep for the quotes. But going back to the AI, why did you task other people also to start building their own AI?
There's two stages to learning something, and there's the carrot and stick, right? So initially it was a carrot, like, let's make people comfortable with it. Let's talk lots about AI. Let's make sure that all the tools are available across Muse. And it was a very friendly stage. And that stage took about a year, 2 years. And at some point, I was like, I actually feel that it's time for the stick to come out, which is a very aggressive way to say it. But I was like, why are people not doing more with AI, and we're not getting the efficiency gains? And the only way for me to force that culture was by me to build a bot myself, record myself in the process of doing that, edit that video myself, drop it on the internet, and then go back to our leadership team. And we had an offsite last week in Prague. And 2 months ago, I dropped that video. And then I went to that group of 70 people that were coming to the offsite, and I said, you only get to come if you share your bot with us. If you do not share your bot in advance, you don't get to come to the offsite. So 70 people build a bot, shared it publicly, and some not so great, but they had a lesson. Some, the winners were the salespeople. There was 3 people from the go-to-market team that actually ended up winning the award from 70 people. It wasn't the developers, it wasn't the product leaders, it was the people that were brand new to it, who felt the deep pain of their job, and they built some of the most innovative bots. But it was the forcing function of the stick, basically,
Yeah.
of saying, sorry, no, you only get to come to this really important offsite if you build it and you show it to us. And people afterwards told me, I really did not like that you made me do that task, until I did it, and until I struggled for 5 hours. And the lessons I've learned through those 5 hours were more than I've ever learned in the last year,
Yeah.
because it's so powerful when you start to talk to AI and all the wires start to connect in your head. It's like, oh, this is how it all works, and this is how it comes together. And the first AI bot is the dumbest one, but then you've got the baseline, and then you can build on that, and you can make it better and better iteratively. We're living in one of the most exciting times in technology right now, I think. That was not my opinion 3 years ago, but that is what it has become over time. And I gotta prophesize that to the world now.
Yeah. Do you have a programming background, by the way? No.
I'm a hotelier. I know
Yeah.
nothing about coding.
So you had to teach yourself coding and
You don't.
build.
You don't. Honestly, if you can talk like a normal human being, you can build an AI bot today. If you've got a problem to solve, you can build an AI bot by just talking to it, and just using, every time you get stuck, you just say, my bot did this thing. What did I get wrong? How do I fix it? And honestly, it will just give you the answer, and it will say, I built a chatbot and I got stuck because it wasn't answering the question. I said, why is it not answering the question? And I realized I hadn't connected the database of answers to the questions, and I hadn't saved it in a database and connected the dots. These are stupid, but you learn so fast, and AI is really good. So you do not need to learn to code.
That's cool. And that also opens it up to indeed people who don't have the coding background.
Every single person can build with AI today.
That's good to hear and encouraging to hear. Also that there are forward-looking CEOs who just force that.
It's scary.
Yeah,
But you have to.
no. But let me put it this way: that let employees face their fears in a positive way and then maybe fail. But hey,
Yeah.
at least you tried.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, Matthijs, what if you could give other founders who want to build, looking back also on your journey with Mews, if other founders would like to build a company that is as high performing and as inclusive as Mews, what would you recommend they do? What would be the first step and something that they definitely should not forget?
I don't know where this saying is, like, because I lived in so many countries that I don't know the saying, but there's a saying called "the fish stinks from the head," and I think it's a Czech saying, but like
Yeah.
basically it means that if I don't lead it at the top of the organization, it won't be the culture. And a lot of people will be like, right, it's a HR function. HR has to make
Yeah.
diversity work, but it doesn't. If like it's my telling, I want to make sure that diversity works, and yes, HR is there to enable that conversation, but I have to lead it. And I think often this is what founders get wrong. They default this as a HR function, but this is a founder thing. If you look around your company today and you don't see diversity, there probably isn't diversity. And recognize that there's a problem and then lead from the front line by just talking about, just saying it. Like, I look around the room, this seems not a very diverse room. Should we talk about that? That's a great starter.
Sounds great. Um, if there was, looking back, something you would do different from how you've done it, what would that be and why?
Like, I would love to say that I'd like to be more deliberate
Uh,
early on, but I also know that when you fight for survival, it's the last thing you think about. But I would love to have had a strategy, and I would have loved to have access to AI at the time, because then you can very quickly build out like a policy or a directive towards it. Whereas back in the day, you just had to Google your way through life. It was
mm,
never as good as AI.
it's
But
much quicker.
it's much quicker to kind of give it shape in, because you can ask AI saying, hey, this is my situation. We've got 20 employees at this company. We're all white male. How do I diversify it? And AI starts to give you suggestions.
Mm,
And we were never that strategic, because it just wasn't available. But you can't start with diversity soon enough, because if you build that in too late in the journey, it will never feel authentic. Because when you basically grow a company with all the same people who hire the same people because they're all hiring their friends, and then the homogenization sets in, you'll never be able to fix it, or you can, but it's going to be a really heavy lift and it will feel unnatural. So I'd say start from day one thinking about it, at least, and dealing with your own unconscious biases.
thank you. Magali, closing question for you. How can allies contribute to a more inclusive tech ecosystem?
I would say communication is key. Ask the question. Start by asking the question, how can I help? How can I make my meeting or my team a better place for all of us? Um, Attend those ERG groups meetings, even if you're not part of them, out of curiosity, but also maybe you can contribute by giving suggestion, your opinion, or even maybe you can grow yourself, your skill set, your behavior. Um, I think assessing yourself is also important. How do you behave? How do you perform um, when you are leading a meeting, attending a meeting, or when you're just communicating with others? And it's the self reflection part that is important. And I think if we make it intentional by saying, how am I performing as an ally? If everyone takes a minute to self reflect, they could definitely contribute to making the culture a bit more inclusive. It's, as I said before, it's everyone's role, it's everyone's responsibility to make a company an inclusive space.
And I think the word ally, it's not a noun, it's a verb. And that's a really important distinction because you can't say, yes, I'm open minded, everything is great. No, it's a doing. What are you doing to lean into that conversation? You know, should I, as a man, join women at Mews? Yes, absolutely. You should be part of that ERG so that you can overhear what they're talking. What are the challenges? Allyship is a doing word. It's not a sitting back and saying, yes, I am very accepting of all the things you're doing. Like, no, what are you doing to change it?
Okay, so one challenge to that, because I love what you say. Um, how do you do that without disturbing sort of the safe space that an ERG is supposed to be? Because I think, uh, me, just keeping this to myself, one of the reasons I doubted really long before starting the podcast and before starting to attend women's events and events about diversity was that I thought, well, yeah, actually I need to be there, but on the other hand, then I'm disturbing something. And I don't want to be the person that sort of kills the initiative.
But that's the difference. You're not here to mansplain the situation to us. You are here to ask really thoughtful questions and then listen and curate and lift us up through your platform. Yes, you can go into the Women at Mews ERG, and let me explain to you how we're going to run the show. Like, or there is the let me sit back for a couple sessions, just for my opinion and listen really deeply, and then ask a few really good open questions. And I think that's the difference.
Thank you, because that's exactly the answer I was looking for.
Good.
So, Magali, Elhage, Matthijs, Welle, thank you very much for an amazing interview. Really enjoyed this. If people want to learn more about you and about Mews, where would you like to send them?
LinkedIn is the place for us.
Cool. And probably there's mews.com.
You like honestly, once you follow us, you will regret it with your life. We are everywhere.
Okay, cool.
Thank
And
you.
we'll include those links in the show notes. Again, thank you very much for the interview. And listeners, thank you very much for listening. And until the next episode, keep being awesome. Well, that's it for episode 125 of Women Disrupting Tech with Magali Elhage and Matthijs Welle, titled How Mews Built Inclusive Cultures in Hospitality. Magali, Matthijs and I hope that you found our conversation as inclusive and transformative as we intended it to be. And if you have any questions for Magali or Matthijs, please share them in the comments on Spotify, Apple or YouTube. I'll make sure you'll receive an answer. When you want to connect with Magali and Matthijs or learn more about Mews, please check out the links in the show notes. As usual, you can find the show notes at womendisruptingtech.blog via the link in the caption. On the blog, you can also find the show notes for all 124 other episodes, including guest bios. If you've enjoyed listening to this episode, please consider leaving a rating or a review on Apple or Spotify. Leaving a rating or a review helps new listeners find the podcast and supports my guest by giving them a bigger platform. If you're a regular listener and not already following us, please make sure to follow Women Disrupting Tech on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or YouTube. Following is a simple, zero-cost way to support Magali, Matthijs, and my other guests in closing the funding gap by the end of 2032. For more about Women Disrupting Tech, you can follow the podcast on social media. You can find us everywhere as at Women Disrupting Tech. You can also find us on Substack. On Substack, you'll find in-depth stories and behind-the-scenes insights for each episode, plus the trends that I've spotted across 125 conversations. So don't forget to subscribe to Women Disrupting Tech on Substack. Finally, if you want to connect with me directly, please reach out via email dirkjan@womendisruptingtech.blog or connect with me on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, simply search for my name, Dirk-Jan Hupkes, and you'll find me. With that, I wish you a wonderful day. I hope to see you in the next episode. And until then, as always, keep being awesome.